Well, I am not Marianne Lloyd. This is Garth, but I am here with Marianne Lloyd. Marianne, welcome to your podcast.
Thanks for having me.
This is strange. We've never done anything like this before, but actually there's a couple new things going on right here, right now. First of all, we are piloting looking at each other on Zoom while we are recording this on Zencastr, which is, I think, working pretty well, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good lead into what we want to talk about, which is that sometimes we should try something new and see if it works better than what we've been doing, right, Garth?
Right. Well, it does make it a little more comfortable to have a conversation with somebody when you can see them face to face. And so one of the things that we've been noticing is that these audio interviews, as good as they've been actually, that it's a challenge not to see somebody. You step on each other's toes when you're trying to talk back and forth. You got to leave space. There's all these new skills you need when you're talking this way. Have you found that with your guests?
Yes, I definitely. Just in general, I'm a much slower talker on the podcast than I am in real life, including leaving those pauses because I really want to make sure not to interrupt my guests. Yes.
Would you say that you are an above average speed of talker, or however I was supposed to say that? Do you talk quickly in general?
Yes, definitely.
I know that you had a friend who reached out to you and was like, I've never heard you talk so slowly.
That's right. It's good for me. Be a little more prudent instead of in a rush.
Well, I think this is the question: is can you listen to yourself at 2 times speed on AskPsychSessions?
I can't do 2 times speed. 1.5 speed does sound normal to me, though.
Okay. All right. Well, you know what? We can mess with all this stuff later. We're gonna get you on a long form and hear more about who you are. But today we want to talk about something that you are passionate about and that you wanted to put together for our listeners, which is EDI AskPsychSessions. You want to talk about that title a little bit, or maybe just jump in for us? What's EDI AskPsychSessions?
Sure. So this came out of the recent murders of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, and a clear increased conscientiousness of the role that racism is playing in society and therefore in our classrooms. And as a cognitive psychologist who was not trained to think or talk about these things as they relate to their research or teaching, I'm someone that's been a little bit, I think, late to the game in starting to recognize why this is an important piece of who I am as a member of society and as an educator. I'm someone that would definitely say that I cared about this, but I didn't necessarily do things. So I wanted to speak with people to give other people that may feel like they're in this boat, if not even sure where to begin, a whole lot of options for what to do. So this is not going to be a comprehensive treatment, even with what we hope will be, over a half dozen interviews. But it will give people lots of spaces to get started doing something to improve all of those pieces, being more equitable, diverse, and inclusive faculty members.
Cool. So we have it's going to be we're thinking it's probably going to be between 6 and 9 episodes. How long are these episodes going to run for, and what kinds of things do you cover in those conversations? Are there any highlights that you can tell us about so far?
I'll give some highlights without giving away the best parts, especially since they are my best parts, right? I definitely something that I've learned about, right? I don't want to take someone else's work and not give them credit. So
right.
Yes. The episodes run anywhere from about 13 minutes to closer to half an hour, and we cover what you can do with your syllabus. We talk about how you can be a better mentor to students from, I'm going to say BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and people of color populations. I mean, I think that's, just to take an aside, we spend some time talking about vocabulary, right? Because it seems that we have lots of different reference points. I think a couple of things that come up are things that come up often in the podcast, that if you're someone that really cares about creating an environment where students can belong, how you can be actively trying to do this and sometimes maybe accidentally not doing this, And also the theme that you have to be willing to be vulnerable and make corrections and learn and make adjustments. I mean, those are some of the pieces at an individual level. And then, of course, we also talk about what to do on broader levels, curricular, committee work, things of that nature.
Can I interrupt you just for a moment and say that I think vocabulary is huge. One of the things that has been happening during this time is, as we've had these conversations with folks, and we've got some upcoming releases for the original Psych Sessions as well. But even that Black, Indigenous, people of color, the vocabulary is not widely understood, and so when you are talking to these people who are, I would say, at the forefront of thinking through these things, they understand the vocabulary and the meaning and why we should be using these terms and not other terms, and they are meaningful and really important. And so I just appreciate from that people, by listening to these episodes, they will benefit not only in their classroom, but I like how you said it, individually, personally. I'm sure that you've done some growing through these conversations, would you say?
I mean, both growing, instantly realizing the first interview I recorded, I had scheduled before we started this mini series with Stacy DeFreitas from the University of Houston downtown, and she has a new book, Positive Psychology with an African American Lens. And one thing that she taught me was this idea of a deficit model, and to be very careful if you're going to bring in readings into your class that deal with issues of race and racism. Don't just bring in really negative things or things that just sort of center and compare one group against whites as if white is the norm and the standard. And so it's like, okay, great. I want to look at the readings I use in my research methods class and make sure that I'm making that adjustment. Make sure you're doing something that touches not just on, a lot of my readings are looking at Black or African American groups versus white. If you're teaching students that are Latinx or of Asian heritage, that you should also be bringing in things about that, right? So I give lip service. I say, listen, we're mostly reading articles with Black and white participants, but know that there are all these issues of discrimination, right? Gender discrimination, homophobia, Islamophobia, but we don't read anything. So I think those are, that was sort of right away. I was like, okay, here is a change that I can make. Just saying I care about this isn't the same as making sure that the readings in the class are broad. And that's from one interview. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm with you. And I listened to a couple episodes back. You kind of dip your toes into the water with some guests here on diversity, and there were just light bulbs going off in my head all over the place. All these insights of things I never saw as problematic that I now see as problematic. And the change is challenging, but it's not impossible. Like one of the things, even as I'm talking and hearing you talk, you can tell me if I'm wrong. I'm hearing you use. We're talking about terminology. I'm hearing you be very careful and measured with the words that you're using to describe people groups, what's going on in the classroom. I sort of feel, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I feel like right now we just got a Nintendo Switch for my daughter. It's her birthday. So I'm terrible at it. I mean, she is so fast at everything, and I have to think through everything so slowly in order to, be competitive with her. Well, I feel like there is a parallel here. I feel so slow at this conversation about, race and anti-racism and white supremacy. And so I don't know if you identify with that at all.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the practice, and I think we talk about this in one of the interviews, that it's only going to get better if you keep working at it, and how, again, and I think it depends on who you are as a faculty member, who you feel is authentic. Like, I feel it's more authentic to just put things on the table. And so I tell students, like, holler if I've missed that this is not a great descriptor, or sometimes I do pause because I want to make sure, because I know that there are words in my memory bank that I want to eliminate because they're no longer preferred, and to me, that just sets a signal that you have something valuable to contribute, and I'm not perfect, that this is work. I think that's the most important piece of this whole conversation that I hope we can maintain nationally, is that this is not this is a verb to be anti-racist, and it is not there's that analogy I saw, of course, on social media, right? Reading a book about mountain climbing does not make you a mountain climber any more than reading, White Fragility or Me and White Supremacy or How to Be Anti-Racist makes you those things. So I think, yeah, I definitely, it's not my comfortable language. If we wanted to talk about memory illusions, then I could get my words per minute up. But
well, skills-based learning is so big in psychology. Well, what we want our students to not only take away this content and knowledge, but also practice these skills. And now we get to model it and get to be novices again in a new way. So that's kind of exciting to learn. Now, that's kind of the individual side. I cut you off before because you were going to talk more about kind of the system side of things too. Did you get into any of that in your interviews where you're talking about institutions or culture, those things?
yes, so certainly in a couple of them, we talk about having a department that values equity, diversity, and inclusion, as opposed to just individual faculty trying to work on this, how that can do some stage setting as well. Because I think what's important here is that there's two pieces at play. There are the students who are in your classrooms that are seeing or not seeing themselves represented in what you're discussing. And then there's also the content that you're teaching and the extent to which that takes a lens of equity, diversity, and inclusion to it. And I am someone that, as I mentioned earlier, like, not only was I not sort of trained in this from a pedagogy perspective, my research field, as the new article on perspectives in psych science by Stephen Roberts, who was on the podcast talking about representation a bit back, cognitive psychology just doesn't talk about race, like, period. We act as if memory is a thing, but we don't necessarily know that that's true. So we do talk about how both you can work with faculty to make your classrooms inclusive, but also make sure that what you're teaching is inclusive. So yeah, this is, no one should feel like, sorry, I shouldn't say no one. Most of us, I think, will find that we can put some work into either of those, but starting small. That's the other theme that one of the interviews talks about, right? You're not going to just be able to overhaul and read 10,000 articles and feel as comfy about that as you might if, a t-test formula, as I do.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. I think about my own training in counseling psych, and I remember when we would talk about cross-cultural considerations or perspectives or sociocultural, that it just didn't click at the time for me as a white man. I didn't understand it. I actually remember kind of learning these things, like how should you work with, or what should you be aware of when you're working with people from this people group, but it was so distant from me and theoretical that, and I learned it, but I never internalized it. So even if it was in the curriculum, I would say that it just never, and I didn't spend that much time doing counseling. I probably applied or have been learning to apply these things more to the classroom. But I do think we need to think hard about our educational background and who we were learning from and what the curriculum was. So, I don't know how, maybe that's a question that we can, start to bring into our conversations with on Psych Sessions, Ask Psych Sessions, is, who was it all white men who were your mentors and your professors? Or were there any people of color? Were there women who stuck out to you as kind of the most important mentors and professors? And there's all kinds of diversity to talk about.
And so if I can follow up question, so in that multicultural psych class, I'm going to guess that they didn't ask you to really reflect on what it meant to be white?
This was 2002. This, of course not. Like this wasn't an issue, right?
Right.
Well, it wasn't for us. We were all white.
Yeah. And so I think that's the other the other sort of, I find, reassuring piece as this conversation happens is that, because to me, that's where that's where the most people are in our field. That's where the power is. Like, that's where, I hope people will also recognize that just because that's not explicit, that there's still implicit impacts happening.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Marianne, I am really looking forward to this mini series. It will premiere in 2 weeks. We'll have a release in 2 weeks and 4 weeks from today, and there'll be multiple episodes. It'll be packaged up. Is that right?
That is correct. Yes. Yes.
Okay, and
Hearing
so
from people from a variety of institutions, a variety of backgrounds. I just want to give a huge thank you to the guests who have been incredibly generous with their time and expertise. It's really been glorious to meet, people that I would not have connected with otherwise.
Well, and thanks to you, Marianne, for doing it, because I know even though we pay you the huge bucks to volunteer your time to do this, I really do appreciate that you went out and found these people. You're passionate about it, and we're going to get this to folks in time for fall semester, so that they can do some thinking and reflecting before they get back into their classrooms. And I know that was kind of one of the things that you wanted to make sure that people had this during summer. So again, thanks for your work on this. I think it's going to be really helpful to people. Any final words about this particular special mini series coming up?
Just to pick one thing, right? Commit to one thing. Don't use that all or nothing thinking error of, if I can't, make my class to the standard that, I'm hearing, because you'll hear people talk about their courses, and that might be a very big stretch from where your course is. And if you want suggestions, email me. I'm happy to workshop with other I love meeting strangers. That's my other piece.
That's why you're the perfect host. That's really great advice. And the way that I've often said this to folks is listen for when your like heart jumps out of your chest at something. That's usually a good indication that could be your way forward. And hopefully that happens even more than once. But yes, one thing. That's great advice. Marianne Lloyd, thank you for all your contributions to Ask Psych Sessions and for doing this. And we look forward to the mini-series.
Thanks.